But in the center is this like curled over, like hunched in like a fetal position, desiccated body type thing. And she was like, every time I see one of those, it's weird, and I wonder what it is. We're gonna find out, ladies and gentlemen. It's not great. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It is me, your host, Maria, with my ruggedly handsome co-host,
William. And today, the book we're doing is The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. And this is a book where, me and Maria usually chat a little bit before we start the recording. In this case, we had to work out a bunch of technical stuff. But literally a minute ago, I was like, I just want to get started in talking about this book. So we're here exactly. She's sipping her tea. This was such a fun book to read.
It was amazing. And I didn't know, we finished The Last Graduate a while ago at this point, and we both really enjoyed it. I think it was the first book that we kind of just both really enjoyed without a lot of reservations, because we both enjoyed Axiom's End, but Will had some problems with the main character, with how military stuff was done, and Last Graduate, we just both had a fun time, and the ending was such a cliffhanger. But it has been such a long time, and we've read so many other books, and we just finished Nona 2 weeks ago, and Nona the Ninth was so good and had but it's such a specific tone that I wasn't I was looking forward to getting back into this world, but it wasn't I can't wait for Electo the Ninth to come out, and so that's what I was craving. And then I think 4 hours into this book, I was just give me nothing but.
Literally about a half hour in, I was like, oh man, I really want to reread Last Graduate. Not because this isn't good, but I was just remembering how much fun that book was and the movement of the plot, and it was all just going towards the end of the book. I think the way I described it is that A Deadly Education, that was the build-up, and The Last Graduate was the payoff, all the way. By the way, we have videos of both. Go check them out in the card corner, which I will never link because I'm lazy. I'll link them in the description. Those are much easier to link. But so go check those out. They're back from when we were just a baby channel with literally, I think 10 subscribers. But that book I was reminded of how much fun it was while I was reading just the beginning of this one. And then this one continues on that way. It's so much fun. I read this in 2 sittings of 4 hours each. There are things that I'm going to pick at as we go, certain Novik-isms that I'm getting a little tired of after having read all of her bibliography. But this was such a great book.
What got me was the amount of subtle twists that she had been laying out since the start. And that's what makes them subtle, is that the pieces for this had been laid out since the beginning. But it is only in this book that they're not easy to miss twists, or they're not impactful. They are very impactful, and there were several where I was like, oh my god, horrifying. Horrified. She has such a great way of building dread, not as much as in this book as in Uprooted, which had that just sickening, dreadful buildup. This had it, but in a much more subtle way, I found, and it was just, the payoffs were great. It hits emotional beats beautifully. The character remains herself, but has also gone on a journey, and this is the culmination of the arc we've been going on. And
I liked her so much more in this book than I did back at the beginning, and even in Last Graduate. With each book, I've liked her more and more, Elle, the main character. And this time, I was just, and her and Orion, I just ship so hard. They're so cute. And then what happens with them in this book, they're not even together for a lot of it, because we'll get into the plot machinations. But I was so here for this book, and it was just so readable. Again, a few Novik-isms I'm not totally in love with, but between this and having read Nona the Ninth 2 weeks ago, there is such a difference between good writers and mediocre writers.
Hmm.
And like having read Lightlark before that, like these two books are on just a different level than all the other books we've read that are just kind of passable, but like you're like, this doesn't really work well and that doesn't really work well. And it's like, no, everything here works well.
It's interesting because I am currently reading in the background, like every time we finish something before I jump into something else, I read a bit of Holly Black's The Cruel Prince, the Folk of the Air series. I'm on the third book at this point. The video dropped today. I'm not in that video, though I have feelings about the first book that I, because of my schedule, was never able to sit down in front of a camera and spew about. But if you'd like to know what those feelings were, please go see our end of the year roundup for live stream that we did. Oh, look at that. And you'll see me give some of my thoughts on it. But that series has immense readability. Like, it is very, very easy to read and get through. And there's always something to push you to want to keep reading. But it is not impactful. Like, at no point was I like, oh my God. And like, I sent Will some pictures of me processing some stuff while I was on a walk earlier and just like,
the twists in this book, they make sense, and they hit you emotionally because they hit Elle, the main character, and like they recontextualize things. There's a couple that are just like, damn, like it's interesting because I wouldn't say that the first two books had a lot of twists like that, but this one really does, because this is the first time you're outside of the school, the murder
mhm.
Hogwarts as I call it, and out in the real world. And it's cool because you still see a bunch of the characters from the school, and like some new ones as well. But like, so you start seeing the greater context in which a lot of the things we've learned actually are placed.
It's amazing. We're going to talk about how it's amazing. Like Will said, we normally talk a lot about the books beforehand. And we really didn't with this one. Like, we both kind of read it pretty quickly. And besides being like, oh my God, we love it. Like, there was no, like, we normally be like, yes, and this thing, and this thing. Oh, yeah, you noticed that? I noticed that too.
No.
None of that. So I don't know what the Novik isms are that he has issues with. I don't even know if they were things that I thought of while I was reading. I'm very excited to have this discussion. You're going to get my first time reaction to Will's thought,
Unvarnished.
which normally doesn't happen. Normally those happen off screen. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm just like, I'm ready to get into the plot because this is so amazingly plot. Like, I remember all the shit that happens.
I finished it yesterday and you finished it a couple hours ago. Yeah.
Yes.
And most of what we've done is just all caps each other things. Like, you haven't gotten to this plot twist yet. It's great. Kind of pretty much is all we've
the
done.
feels. Like, that's it.
What is the setup for this book?
Like all the books so far, she picks up immediately where the last book left off, which is the graduation. At the end of the last book, they did something radical. They decided, instead of just going through graduation as normal, they were just going to punt the entire school into the void, make the school a trap for a bunch of Malia monsters. Everyone was just going to graduate. Like, the freshmen, everyone. They were going to get all the kids out and ideally get about half of the world's monsters into this thing, shove it off into the void, solve some problems. Everything was going well. Super great. Awesome. Like, there was a Mawmouth. Elle dealt with it, though. Things were good. Orion is just like... Orion, who, again, for context, is my puppy with a rocket launcher. My best boy, my goodest boy. He is Elle's love interest, her friend. They are two outsiders for different reasons. We'll go into more about that. But anyway, he's running around like killing mouths, feeding mana back into Elle. Elle is like bringing the school down. And then at like the last moment, as the two of them are about to go, Patience, this giant Mawmouth who has been living in the school for God knows how long, just eating kids. He just sits on the outside of the graduation little doors and just grabs people as they go by. He pops out of nowhere, and Orion looks at her and is like, I love you, Elle. Goodbye. And just shoves her through the thing. So she gets portaled back to Wales. And he's just stuck in the school as it's going to careen off into the void. And you're like, oh shit. Oh no. This is not what I thought the third book was going to be about.
It was such a cliffhanger. I remember finishing it and being like, what the... We got to wait a year to figure out what happened. And this book picks up right as Elle shoots back into the real world. She meets her mom because she comes out of the gate wherever like she was. Her mother, for context, is like a very gentle, healing witch. I love their relationship in this book and how it's handled and Elle's thoughts about it. And Elle just immediately starts doing everything she can to try to grab at Orion, which I was a little surprised by because I thought the deal was once it's in the void, that's it. It's gone forever. But in this book, it's not quite.
And so she tries because she thinks like there has to be a second before it careens off into the void. So she opens up a portal and she reaches for him in like a puddle. Like she finds a puddle and she's like, and one of the things that this book does that I really enjoyed is the idea of intention. And she like looks at the puddle and it's not reflective enough for her purposes, but she's like, you are reflective enough. Like she can bully with her intent and her thoughts this puddle into being a flat enough surface, and it works. And she puts her hand in and she sees his form and she goes to grab him, but he's already surrounded by the Maw-mouth. Patience has him, and she's trying to get him, and she's trying to pull him out and get rid of the Maw-mouth, and then Orion just pushes her back and cuts off her, because right now she's living off of the supply of magic that he was providing her. That's why she thought, oh yeah, I can still get to him, because she was still being pumped full of magic through him. Then he cuts it off because he knows, you can't try get me if you ain't got no power, bitch. And she's just left in this puddle crying, and her mom is like, oh, my darling girl, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Because for context, the day her mother graduated, pregnant with a little embryo Elle, her dad was eaten by Patience and taken by a Maw-mouth during their graduation. So her mom also graduated, goes back home, having lost the man she loved. And so she's so sorry. And there is a bit of, as Elle is coping the first few days with this loss, there's a weight because she remembers that at the end of the first book, beginning of the last book, her mom told her, my darling girl, stay away from Orion Lake. And she knows she has to ask her mom why she said that. And she doesn't really want to get the answer.
Well, and so one of the things I really liked is Elle's relationship with her mother, where you can tell that Elle loves her mother deeply, but she's still such a thorny person, and the way she feels frustration that builds up in a combative way versus like, different people handle stress in different ways, and Elle does not handle hers very healthily because she was built to be an evil wizard, which we actually kind of find out the reason for in this book, which is really cool. And so like you get this, you understand her even as she pushes her mother away at times. And also for context, the thing with Maw-mouths is that they don't eat you and digest you. They eat you and then you scream forever in their stomach until the Maw-mouth dies, which it never does. So at this point, she thinks Orion has been eaten by the Maw-mouth and is screaming in the Maw-mouth's stomach forever.
And is just going to live this terrible life, like the half-life thing. So she's just distraught. And eventually she's like, Mom, why did you tell me not to hang out? And Mom's like, maybe we shouldn't. You don't actually want to know? And she's like, no, now I have to know. And what her mom says was her mom would have dreams. And Elle, throughout the first two books, would have dreams of her mom, where it was almost like she could touch her or like she could smell, and there was something hyper realistic about them. And what was happening is in those moments, her mom was dreaming about her as well. And her mom would grab glimpses of her. And her mom had a vision of her the day that one Maleficer kid tried to kill her. And Orion came in and put the healing pad that her mom made on her, like get the gash in her stomach. And her mom was there in that moment and saw her. And then as Orion touched her, touched Elle, her mom could feel it. And there was this deep, clawing, grotesque hunger in him. And her mom was like, oh no, I do not like whatever that was. And she didn't have enough room to say that. So she was just like, stay away. And Elle was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And she didn't. And I was like, you don't know him. He's a great guy. Like, yeah, he might like kill mouths and get mana from them and stuff. But he's fantastic. You don't know him. Like you didn't know him. Shame on you. Her and her mom have that. And then they spend a few days together. They're getting into some sort of habit. And then she eventually takes out her Golden Stone Sutras, the book that she found in the first book.
Okay, so there are these things called enclaves that wizards live inside that protect them. Lizards. Hey, it's late at night. The wizards live inside, and it protects them from mouths on the outside, and then it also lets them do like cool magic on the inside. And that has always been the biggest conflict in the books, is between the haves who live in the enclaves and the have-nots who don't live in the enclaves and aren't safe all the time. And I mention that because that will become a massive thing in this book.
Yeah.
And so The Golden Enclaves is what that refers to, and the Golden Sutras, which she has, are basically like a really old way of building an enclave from the ground up.
One thing that Elle knows prior to the start of this book is that her mom has always hated enclaves. And one of the biggest issues between her and her mother growing up was Elle wanted an enclave spot because Maleficari were super attracted to her. She was just this delicious, super powerful little baby snack. And she was like, Mom, why won't you protect me by taking me into an enclave? To the point that her mom considered trying to go to an enclave, went there and was like, nope, I can't do it. And what it is that enclaves are built with Malia. They're built with taking life force from something else. And her mom is strictly mana and very against Malia, and Elle kind of never thinks of it more than that. And so these Golden Stone Sutras are incredibly important because they're enclaves that are built out of mana. They don't use any Malia, and there hasn't been a wizard alive who could actually use them, and one of the reasons they fell out of fashion because there was no wizard powerful enough to actually be able to do the whole working. And it also takes a massive fuck ton amount of mana, and the enclaves aren't as fancy or as cool or as big as modern enclaves. So they just fell out of fashion. Nobody was using this. But Elle, in her first year, the library gave this book to her.
And now we find out why.
Oh my God. She pulls it out and she's
This
like,
is the first of a lot of great twists.
It's such a good twist, and it just, oh God, it recontextualizes so much. But it broke my little heart. Anyway, she pulls it out and she's like, Mom, this is my plan. I'm going to put up all these Golden Stone Sutra enclaves. And her mom sees the book and just starts howling. Like she's never seen her mom so overcome with emotions. She has to try help her mom. She's terrible at it. Like she is not good at helping her mom. Eventually, what her mom says is that while her and Arjun, her father, were in school together, their goal was to find the Golden Stone Sutras so that they could erect golden enclaves and that were based off of mana. And so they asked the school, they basically said, we will give you anything if you give us this book. From if you pull it from wherever it is through the void and give it to us. With wizardry in this world, again, intention. If you leave an open bargain, if you don't normally if you make a bargain, you put something, if you give me this, I'll give you this thing. And it has to be of equal weight. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. But this particular kind of bargain that's open-ended allows the universe to take its price. Like whatever they get from it. And her mom in that moment realizes the price they paid was not only Arjun's life, but Elle's everything that has happened to her.
Because when they made that deal, she was pregnant with Elle but didn't realize it. And so technically Elle was one of the things she could offer.
And that's what she offered. And that's what ended up. And it's got a little bit of the law of surprise from The Witcher to it, which I don't know. But her mother realizes that Elle has had to pay. Not only did she have to pay through losing Arjun, but Elle has had to pay to get this thing. And her mom is just so upset by this, that this decision her and Arjun made back when they were in school would cost Elle so. And it's just so shit. Like, oh my God, this was her parents' dream. The book didn't come to her out of sheer fucking luck. It came to her because of this thing her parents asked for, and she literally had to fight a mouth to get it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but then the reason that she's the evil wizard to be, so to speak, is because they talk a lot in the book about the balance of how things have to be balanced one with the other. So this really good non-Malia type thing came out, and she had to come out the opposite of it. That was my understanding of it, right?
Yes. Her parents made such a selfless, because by offering themselves up, by offering what they had, they made from good motivations and selfless offering. And so their payment, because she always thought she came out the way she was because her mom was just such a good person, that she was the counterbalance to how great her mom was. This is going to get even more complicated as we go. And I fucking love it because Naomi, not straightforward at all. I love it.
Yeah, if you haven't read the 2 previous books, you're not going to get this. I'm going to try to keep recapping for people who have read them, but maybe have forgotten a few of the details. But there's a lot to come, guys.
Just, oh my God, it's so good. Anyway, her and her mom kind of deal with this information, and then a bird appears at one point and is like, Elle? And it says it like Lou's voice, her friend from school. And she was like, Lou? And then the bird like repeats her and then fucks off. And she was like, that's kind of weird. And then she gets a phone call from her friend Adia, who's like, where the fuck are you? Because she promised that when she got out of school, she would get a phone and call them. Adia even made them learn their phone numbers as a song, because Elle doesn't have a phone, because of course she doesn't have a fucking phone. And Elle never called. Adia calls Liesel. That's what happens. Liesel was the valedictorian of their year, and from the last book, she comes in towards the later half of the book to help organize. Liesel is the epitome of efficiency and practicality. She's smart as fuck. She's not sentimental, but she's kind.
But she's also pragmatic.
She's German, by the way.
It's a bit of an ethnic stereotype, but I am so here for Liesel as a character. I don't even
I love
care.
her. The audiobook narrator is great, but does not do a very good German accent.
No. Bad German accents are my favorite, but this one just is mediocre. It's not really good and it's not really bad. The voice she does for Adia is hilarious because it's so American. Like Arjia is Indian American, but like the voice she has is so American, which I think is hilarious.
Straight up American. Liesel just shows up and is like, yes, you are just sitting in your feels. like get up, do shit. I was like, what the fuck are you here? Who asked you? And she's like, Adia called me. You have been MIN. Everybody's been trying to figure out what's happening. And basically, Liesel is her call to adventure. Liesel is like, put on some clothing. The London Enclave has been attacked. They need your help. And what has been happening kind of in the background that you're learning about, and this first happened in the beginning of the last book, where as kids were inducted, you learned that a smaller enclave had been completely destroyed, just gone. It like collapsed. And so there's talk of a maleficer around who is fucking with some enclaves.
And the thing is, when an enclave goes down, all the Maleficaria and Mawmouths go in and try to get in. It's like a weakness. So right now, the London one is basically under siege by a Mawmouth. And like, Elle is the only person who can kill a Mawmouth. She's killed 2, and there's only one other character in the book who has done that, and it took 30 wizards and a week for him to be able to do it. Like, Mawmouths are eldritch.
They are the worst thing that you can be exposed to. There's been 3 enclaves hit. The one that was super destroyed, Bangkok, which I think was also destroyed, and then London. London has now been hit. So she's like, you need to come, because Liesel is now part of, she got, by being valedictorian and sleeping with Alfie. There we go. By sleeping with Alfie, who is, he's part of the London Enclave, and his dad is a hire. She now is part of the London Enclave, and she was like, we need your help. There is a Mawmouth, and we're all, not only is the Enclave weak because somebody attacked part of the foundation, but there is now a Mawmouth in the fucking enclave. It is eating people. We need your help. And Alfie had come with her because his dad has offered to help try go in and defeat the Mawmouth. And Alfie's like, my dad's gonna die. And so Elle's like mad. She doesn't want to do it. She's grieving. How dare they come? And eventually Liesel's like, you're not gonna leave them. Like, I know you're not just gonna let those people die. Like, it's not you. Stop pretending it's you and get the fuck in the car. Which is the kick she needs to kind of get her shit together. So they drive in a fake car to the London Enclave. The minute she walks into the Enclave, she can, number one, feel that there is something wrong. The mana and everything, like the structural, because Enclaves are like 80% not real. It is fabricated through magic buildings. They also have a space issue where you have to like buy apartment complexes in the real world, and then the Enclave uses that space and puts it into the magical void space.
The enclaves can kind of squish and deform too, depending on where things are. So like not an enclave, but a similar thing is in the car. Elle was like, there's a lot of room here, but we probably don't. The car is switching where the room is in our perception based off of who is looking where. And that's how a lot of the magic works. In this case, enclaves are built essentially on the void, like one single brick type thing on the void then supports the rest of the enclave, which will become relevant in a little bit. But as soon as she gets to the enclave, she's like, oh wow, there is a pit of Malia just under this enclave.
She can feel it. She can feel the
like sickening,
queasy, sickening feeling. She's like, yo, that's gross.
No wonder my mom couldn't handle this.
Exactly. And it's great watching Elle process a lot of the things her mom did that she judged her mom for. Because like at the start of the first book, she's like, all enclaves all the time. By the end of the first book, she's like, nah, the enclave system isn't fair. By the Second book, she's like, fuck the system. We're making a new system. I'm going to build enclaves for everyone. And then in this book, she goes on like, oh man, such a journey. But anyway, so it's monster hunting time. She finds the Mal. She ends up getting separated from everyone, but she finds the Mawmouth, and it has just eaten someone that Sarah, one of the girls who is also from the London Enclave, knew. And she sees it, and it's just this big thing. It's not as big as I think the one she dealt with in the library, or it might have been bigger, but anyway. And she's so angry because it had been running from her. And the hallways of the Enclave, like, she couldn't get to it. It kept running, and she was just, like, Elle gets angry super easy, and she just sits and she sees she sees, so to the point where previously she'd been trying to get to it, but she didn't actually want to deal with it. She was still terrified internally of Mawmouths, and she didn't want to get to it. But then she got so mad, she was like, let me see this fucking Mawmouth. And it comes, and it's like trying to get aware, and it's like all the voices are screaming and everything, and she just gets so mad. She looks at it and she goes, come at me, you're dead, you're already fucking dead. And it just dies. And she didn't mean it to be a spell, but again, intention is big here. And all she did was, she said that, she pushed her mana behind it. Oh, London gave her a power share. She pushed her intention with mana at this thing, and basically just reminded it that all of the people inside it are just dead. That it is essentially just a dead thing, and it just dies. It just turns into jelly, and it dies. And something we didn't talk about in our previous video, but it gets mentioned here, is that in the center of all this, like, runoff gooey stuff all over the place,
the Mawmouth takes your body and makes it part of itself, so it's essentially a bunch of bodies Frankenstein together.
And also, like, goo.
Yeah, and goo.
And
Ectoplasm,
slime.
essentially.
Yeah, and it just gooshed. It just glooped all, so it was like bits of dead bodies. But in the center is this, like, curled over, like, hunched in, like, a fetal position, desiccated body type thing. And she was like, every time I see one of those, it's weird, and I wonder what it is. We're gonna fucking find out, ladies and gentlemen. It's not great.
I felt like this was a little anticlimactic. It's not a big problem with the book, but like Mawmouth suddenly not being a problem for her to deal with, it didn't devalue what they are, but you don't get the cool catharsis of a fight from it. It's just now like, oh, okay, it's an Ellen. In general, you really want to see Elle blow shit up, and she doesn't do it a lot in this book. Like, I understand that that's because, you know, we want the cathartic release of seeing her be cool and badass, and the book isn't really about her power being used to be cool and badass. It's more interested in questions of all this other stuff, but like I kind of wanted to see a cool badass battle.
And especially because we got that in the last book. Like, she got to do a lot of really cool badass stuff once people started giving her enough mana to be able to do it. Because that was something that we discussed in the first book, is that Elle knows she has the ability to do a lot of incredibly powerful things. She just does not have enough fucking mana to do any of it. And once she is given enough power to do so, she fucks shit up. And so she literally, like, does a super volcano spell, which is the one that she used to, like, punt the thing into the void. Gets rid of the Mawmouth. Huzzah. Prior to getting rid of the Mawmouth, Alfie basically said, he did one of those open-ended bargains where he was like, if you do this and my dad doesn't have to go fight this Mawmouth, I will make it up to you. And now that means, now that she killed the Mawmouth, he has to, like, just help her. So she's like, Alfie, come find me, I'm lost. And suddenly Alfie appears, and his father realizes this is a thing. And his father is chill, because you meet a lot of Enclave people that are really entitled and kind of dickish. And Alfie's dad isn't. Like, he's willing to talk with Elle, like, and you don't actually get a lot of scenes with him, but the vibe you get from him is, like, he's a little bit different. But the domina of the London Enclave is like, would you like to come live in our enclave? And she's like, no, I've already rejected you once. I do not want to come live in your enclave. And they were like, well, shit, what do you want? And she has to think of something that is worth killing a Mawmouth. And she's like, okay, you guys have really pretty gardens here. I want you to let non-enclavers come hang out in your gardens and in your library. That's what I want you to do. And Alfie's dad is like, Roger, let's start doing it right now. And while that's happening, there's this, like, weird witch behind him who she didn't notice.
There's a hippie witch, essentially.
She's covered in rags. Each of her rags are imbued with artifice to make it forgettable. So, like, unless you're directly looking at her, you do not realize she's there. And this bitch is named Yancy. She's great. She is someone Elle's mom knew. So she recognized Elle before Elle recognized her. And she basically is like, hey, Galadriel. But, like, she gets shooed off because, like, she's kind of, I don't want to say she's a wizard hobo, but she's kind of a wizard hobo.
She's a wizard. She's 1,000% a wizard hobo, and she basically is like, "All right, I'm gonna get my other wizard hobos, and we're gonna have a party on this garden that you think is super sacred."
Now that we now have the ability to be on, before the party gets into full swing, Liesel's like, "Would you like to come back to my place for dinner?" And Alice like, "Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm not gonna go home tonight." And so Liesel's like, "Yeah, it's perfect." So she goes up to Liesel's little apartment, which is tiny, but like there's a drape, like a thing. You can see the bed beautifully presented in the corner. There's like food and everything. She eats with Liesel. She asks Liesel, like, "What's your thing? Like, why are you doing all of this?" And Liesel basically confesses her motivations, which is her dad basically, like, never took ownership of her and her mom, and, like, this whole, and then, like, tried to kill her mom. Like, it's a whole thing. But anyway.
Revenge. She wants some revenge. But also, there's a really interesting conversation here where Elle is like, "Why are you dating Alfie? Like, you don't like him.
And you don't need him. You have your enclave spot."
So basically, she has the discussion that, like, no, she doesn't love Alfie, but, like, what it was is Elle is like, he's so much lower beneath you. Like, you're so much better than he is. Why are you dating him? And she's like, but he wants to make something of himself, and that is useful. And Elle thinks about how, like, that is actually kind of an interesting idea, is if you want to be somebody, it's easy to find, it's not easy, but once you find a Liesel, they can push you and mold you into being something more, which is what Liesel then tells her.
And not just that, Liesel doesn't just want to be in the enclave, she wants to be the next Domina, which means she has to position herself, and Alfie's dad is set up to become the next Domina, and so she wants to get a council position, so attaching herself to Alfie as a long-term plan, and because he wants to be something and will allow her to push him, beautiful thing. And Elle realizes that this dinner was a proposition. The bed was presented beautifully, and Liesel is basically like, "You want to become a thruple? You want to become a power thruple?" And she doesn't say it. Nobody says it, but Elle's like, politely decline, because she knows that what Liesel wants, because Liesel basically tells her, like, "Why don't you just go to these enclaves, get mana from, like, work with them, like, instead of asking for something dumb like letting people into that, why don't you ask for a power sharer, and then you can go set up your enclaves, your golden stone enclaves. Like, why wouldn't you do that?" That's the practical thing that Elle knows, that if she compromises her, because of the Malia and the decisions enclaves make at the expense of decisions who are outside of them, Elle doesn't want to work with them. And she knows that given her predisposition for not great magic and destruction, that it is a slippery slope from just being like, "Okay, I'll just take your magic and work with you and help you sometimes." Because the idea is, Liesel says, if a Maw-mouth or something comes to attack them, you just offer to deal with it, and then all the enclaves will just give you power. You're going to come anyway. Like, you're going to go save them anyway. You're not going to not do it. And Elle's like, "But if I'm taking something from them, that's when it gets sticky. That's a slippery slope for me as a person." And Liesel's like, "Fair enough." But anyway, they drink, and then Elle realizes she's being bamboozled. She done been heckin' not poisoned, but there was something in the drink.
Enchanted.
And she ends up waking up. Liesel realizes at the same time that Elle has been enchanted, which meant it wasn't Liesel who did it. Alfie comes up and is like, "Yo, Martel, the Domina of London, doesn't want Elle to leave. He's making sure she does it." And they're like, "Oh, fuck, we gotta get her out of here." And so they have to figure out a way to get Elle out where the rest of the London enclave won't know. And Elle's like, "That Yancey lady, she seems like she hangs out around here a lot." And she remembered from when Yancey would come visit her mom that she said she lived around London Enclave. So she's like, if she gets in here, she must know ways to get out. So they find Yancey on in a garden, and a part of the garden that is a memorial. And it's just flat green with little stones on them. And the stones are tied magically to the children that go to the Scholomance. So when the kids die, their stone goes dark, and that's how the parents know that their kids are not going to come back during graduation. It's just a sea of stones, which is incredibly expensive for an enclave, because that's just space. That is just space that has to exist all the time, and it's flat. It's not like they have shelves of the stones. Anyway, that's where Yancey and her gang are having their
hobo party
on the bodies. Alfie's really pissed, but eventually she's like, "Yo, I need you to get me out of here." Yancey's like, "Yes, but it'll take drugs in a while." And Elle's like, "What?" So she has to drink something that has a lizard around it that's like, yo. She drinks it, immediately it gets high, like psychedelics. Liesel's like, I too am going and will have some of the drug. And what it is that Yancey gets here through pockets in the void that used to be part of the Enclave. So they go into what used to be like a horse race derby place.
It's like a shadow almost left in the void.
It was a place that was part of the Enclave, but then, because they needed that space for something else, they yeeted that off. But it's remained kind of half attached. Like, you can still get to it by going to the old doorway and then getting in, but you're like in the void. Shadow World is a really good description of it. And she has to be high, she realizes, because being high makes everything weird. She can smell things, she feels colors. It's almost like, what is that called? Synesthesia?
Yeah, synesthesia.
And she realizes you need that because everything is so weird, you don't notice how, because to be in a place that's like half in the void, you would go crazy knowing that you were in this place. And by knowing that the place is unreal and should be in the void, you will push it into the void. And so to keep it concrete, because again, intention, if you think, this is the place and I can walk through it and it's not going to careen into the void, then it won't do that. But if you're like, holy shit, this is going to careen into the void, it'll do that. So you have to be really high. And they basically at one point have to like sit and like have a conversation.
And it actually doesn't matter what they're saying in the conversation, so long as it's the specific tempo of a normal conversation to, convince the world around them that no, it is a real place right now and there are real people.
And then they have to eat something. She pours something into each of these glasses. They each get a different consistency, and she takes a bite out of hers, and it tastes like the day her and Orion did the nasty in the auditorium before graduation. And it's a beautiful, sad memory for Elle, and she is overcome. And then Liesel has to eat hers, and she can tell because Liesel is just stiff and rigid. And then Yancey doesn't look like, and what it is they're paying. There's a payment that has to be made for going this route, for doing this thing. And they, by doing that, are giving some mana. So it's an amazing sequence, super well done. Like, the book at this point is just, it is gone.
And we haven't talked about it, but like the emotionality of what's happening with Elle is like really great in that she misses Orion. She loved him and he's gone and dead, or she thinks he is, because obviously you feel how she feels about the whole thing and now she's kind of lost in a drift. Oh, yeah, what happens is that when they're with Yancey, she asks Yancey like, hey, if I wanted to get back into the Scholomance, how could I do that?
Well, not even that. She says, how did you get here? This should be in the void. And what Elle is thinking is, if this place should have been in the void and like the wizards who made it yeeted it off into the void, but we can still get here, then I can probably still get into the Scholomance. And if I can get into the Scholomance, that means I have to go back and I have to kill Patience. I have to kill Patience. Precious is her
the Banff of this whole book. I love Precious so much.
Precious is the best. Anyway, it's her little mouse familiar.
We'll never mention her again, but she's great.
And she's like, then I can go and I can kill Patience and I can let Orion rest. And I can, do the one thing I can do for him. And Liesel also is coming to this realization. So she's like to Yancey, how do you get in? How did you get into this place? How did you do it? And Yancey's like, you just have to find the entrance and then you like throw some mana at getting into it. And then you're in. You just have to like be careful. And they're like, okay, fuck, we can get in. We have to find one of the physical entrances for the Scholomance, because they never did. Like, they just, during induction, you're just yeeted there. Like, you're there. And then during graduation, you're just back to where your induction point was.
Because they need to hide the entrance as much as possible, because the idea behind the Scholomance is it's completely separated for everything in the void except for one entrance, and that's what stops demons from coming in all the time. Because it's the void, they can't get in any other way.
They're like, okay, we're gonna fucking go to New York, because to get there, they're gonna need, number one, the location of one of the school's entrances, number two, enough mana to get in. And she's like, listen, the only place you're gonna get enough mana to get in is the New York Enclave, because you're gonna talk to Orion's parents and be like, listen, your son is in a Mallmouth and I can save him. So they go. Also, Adia lives in New York, so she gets to meet Adia and like hang out with her, and it's nice, a nice little reunion. But they go in, they meet his dad, Balthazar. Lake, which is just the weirdest. The fact that his name is Balthazar and then his last name is Lake.
Contrast.
And Balthazar is an artificer, which is Orion was in the artificer track, which is hysterical. Elle can tell he's really good at it, and they have a really complicated conversation because he assumes that she's just trying to get an enclave spot, and he's like, "Listen, I can't give you that," and she's like, "Shut up, you wanker! That's not why I'm here. I loved your son, and now he's dying, and he isn't a mom." And then his dad's like, "Oh shit, you loved him, that guy," and she, like, everybody's like, and he's kind of touched at that point that she loved his son enough.
It's not even that. What's so heartbreaking about it is that he is just so enchanted that his son actually was able to connect with somebody. That his son actually like
Had a real friendship.
and he asks her to tell him about Orion and like what happened there. And that to me, there's just something very like I don't think Orion is autistic, but there are a lot of sort of semi similarities in terms of he is somewhat socially oblivious to certain things. He hyper focuses on certain things.
His parents could never connect with him, and he never had friends.
So this to me was just like a parent who like has always been on the outside of his child, even as deeply as he loved him, and now he's seeing that inner life of him. And it was so touching. I really liked that scene.
It really was. But anyway, she's like, "Okay, now that I've told you the whole story, I need to get back into the Scholomance, and I need power to be able to get in, and then I'm gonna kill the Monmouth." And he's like, "Okay, you need to talk to Ophelia." And Ophelia's his wife, who is next in line to become the domina of the New York Enclave, which is it's the biggest in the U.S. and one of the biggest in the world. Like it's
This is probably a good enough time to talk about it, but why are these books set in the modern day? Like the book goes out of its way to make sure that you understand none of the magical stuff can impact normal people because normal people just don't believe in magic and so they completely like ground it and destroy it. So like I still don't totally understand why Novik set it in the modern day as like a secret magical society.
I suppose the thing for me is I didn't question it, and I actually liked it. I liked because there another thing you deal with is that mundanes, the people, and this would have worked in any time period, but I particularly liked it in ours, where like there are ways in which modern travel is better than traveling through magic because it costs so much. So like flights, like there's a point where there's a giant wizard war that's about to happen, and everybody had to fly on the same flights, and they're all in the airport eyeing each other because until they get like you can't start the fight until everybody's on the battlefield, and if you use magic to get there you'd be using half of your power supply, so you just have to and there was that. And also I think having cell phones as an easy way to communicate, because several plot points require information to be happening very quickly that I think in a different time period would have been like slower and wouldn't have worked for like the snappy, like because if you think about it, we're about to get the update that Bangkok was hit.
But yeah, so I just don't know what dividends she gets from it, and I would just be curious to know because I think maybe she just wanted the characters to have that contemporary sensibility about them. One thing I will say that's another kind of downside to the book, or at least the thing I don't think quite is taken advantage of is, Novik is super interested in disparities in power relationships. Like that has been a thing since the Tamara books. It was a huge thing in Spinning Silver, Maria's favorite book. And now it's also a big thing in this between the enclavers who have magic and those who have power and safety and those that don't. And so there's a lot of that. But something I don't think she quite realizes is that everyone who is in an enclave now went through the Scholomance, where basically they were in like a fight for their lives, where they had to live in this extreme, like boiler cooker of an environment of survival and having to manage social stratification. And so I feel like there's an extent to which the book doesn't really explore that like Martel or the other enclavers are like this partly because they are all traumatized from this time in like a murder magic college. And it's instead treated like they almost were like naturally like this, almost like that's the natural extent of their society.
One of the things I got out of it was less that, because like if you think about it, the amount of enclavers that we meet that are like as shitty as Martel, because like Balthazar feels human. The guy from the Shanghai Enclave we meet at the end is super complicated, and I really like him. Like most of the Enclave people are actually not super. It's like Martel is fucked up, but Balthazar's kind of fine. Alfie's kind of fine.
No, Novik is very careful to always show that the enclavers are people, and most of them are just kind of going along with the river, so to speak, in terms of how people do with privilege. Like they just don't really question it too much. They just kind of go with the system. But I did think that would have been something that was kind of would have been an interesting note to talk about how like they all essentially are dealing with PTSD from a period where they were trained that like if you can't manage these power relationships, you die in the college.
And that I think would have been, but honestly, I think that would have been too much for like this book already has so much happening in it. Something would have had to give. Otherwise, we would have been getting to that stage where we would have been like, does it end?
That's actually a good point in that in terms of the thematic argument that Novik is making, this is not one of them, and this is not necessarily a key part of it. So she kind of just needed to cut things out. I think that's fair. I mean, this could be a book if you wanted to about PTSD and how that makes people form really weird societies, but that's not the point she's making.
Adia tells Elle that Lu's family is now going to that other Chinese enclave that has been hit because Lu's family has been trying to build their own enclave and has been making massive amount of mana for years and collecting it in the hopes of doing that. And basically, this other enclave, Beijing, the Beijing enclave, woohoo! I got it. That the Beijing enclave is like, listen, we've been attacked. We need help kind of rebuilding. If you help us, we will then give you the spells to make your own enclave. And, or you can like join us. It'll be a great time. Don't worry. And she's like, so Lu's going to go do that. So because Lu, like, they do a phone call, all three of them. And Lu's like, I can't come and help you. But Adia's like, I'll be there. We'll do stuff.
Really quickly, one of the things that Elle realized is that the way that they think there's a bad wizard taking down these enclaves is what the wizard is doing when she was in London. She realized is that they're going in and basically cutting the cord at the very bottom of the enclave to destabilize it and gather all of the mana that's in there, which is going to become relevant when you realize that's not exactly what's going on and yet exactly what is going on.
Balthazar, Orion's dad, takes, and Elle is a little caught off guard because he takes her to his apartment, like in the enclave, like just where him and Ophelia and Orion used to live, but the rest of them do. And she's like, oh my god, this is Orion's childhood home. She's reeling. And then she goes to his bedroom, and it is filled with like toys and baseball bats and cars and shit, like unopened. Like he didn't give a shit about this. The only used, worn things are a box of old weapons. There's a child-sized sword. It's troubling her because she looks at this and she thinks, okay, they tried, because she's built this story in her head of parents who just let him be a hero, who wanted him to be a hero, who just forced him to do these things. And now she's looking at this room filled with things of that are obviously ways his parents were trying to have him be a child, that are just completely unused. And she can't really combine those two because the Orion she knew loved her because she didn't treat him like a hero and she just treated him like a normal everyday wanker. She looks at this image of this bedroom and she's like, no, he wanted to do that. He didn't, because she thought they just didn't let him be a child. And this room gives another story, and she's kind of upset about it. And she's walking out and she hears his mother talking to Adia and Liesel. And then she walks in and she sees Ophelia Lake. And she realizes, holy fuck, this bitch is a maleficer. She uses Malia. She's sucking life force from other things.
She is a crazy powerful dark wizard, essentially.
In a really calculating way, because normally maleficers are incredibly beautiful because they're using so much Malia, but Ophelia uses just a little. Enough that normal people don't even realize she's a fucking maleficer because she doesn't look like one and she doesn't seem to act like one. Liesel and Adia see the look on her face, on Elle's face, and they're like, oh shit, something's wrong. And they both start backing away from Ophelia. Like, if Elle's looking at this, like, it's bad, it's probably bad. And Ophelia looks at her and goes, oh, okay. This is what's up. I'm gonna sit over here. Sit down and let's talk. And Elle is like, what the fuck? What are you doing? And Ophelia is like, listen, this world is super fucking complicated. And what you don't realize is you have fucked with the balance. Because what Ophelia wants is to get into the school to reattach it. She doesn't want it careening off into the void. And I was like, but we've punted half of the Maleficaria of the world into the void. And she's like, but there's going to be more. And I was like, no, we calculated it. It should take 50 years to reach even a quarter of the numbers that we were at that, or whatever it is. And Ophelia's like, no, you thought the number of repopulation was stable, but it's not. The more, because Maleficaria is caused by wizards doing Malia, by wizards taking something from another living thing. And what you learn, and Ella's talked about this before, that pretty much every wizard uses a little bit of Malia. Like, you need to do something, you don't have enough of your own power, but there's a mouse or a cockroach or some flies.
Or grass around you.
So you just take it and use it for your working. And by doing that, you are making Maleficaria. And what she did is she just assured that for the next few years, there are going to be more living wizards than there ever was. And everybody got out of the Scholomance this year. Ophelia is like, everybody cheats. My goal is to try get people to cheat less. And by being who I am able to control that, do things like if I am doing it in a controlled setting, ideally it gets other people to cheat less.
She has a really interesting line too where she talks about how everyone cheats and they shouldn't, but they do, and they've tried to get them to stop and they won't. And the problem is that the consequences of their bad actions are too removed for people to make the one-to-one connection between, oh, I cheated a little bit now, and then somewhere in the world, a Maleficaria popped up. And what I found really interesting about that is because, this whole time, Elle, in each of the books, has been trying to battle the injustices of the world as she sees it. And each time she tries, she realizes she's screwing up a system that is kind of to its core rotten. And the more she tries to fix one small thing, it has a counterbalance elsewhere. So, like, they cleared the school out of malls in the first book, and then that caused problems in the second.
Orion saved so many people in the first book. It made the malls, they were hungry and they weren't well fed, so there was more like.
And then they were trying to get rid of the school, and now it's not working again. And so it's almost like there's this rotten root that Elle keeps trying to like shovel out over time, but it just gets more and more complicated. And in terms of what her mom's Orion's mother says about like the consequences of their actions being too far away, it's really interesting because like that's what happens in the real world. So for example, I'm vegetarian and I'm not really for moral reasons or whatever, but one of the things is if I try to eat meat, I can't get it out of my head that I'm eating a corpse. Like, to me, looking at meat is like, why are you eating a dead thing? Like, to me, that's where it is in my brain. But for most people, it's not a chicken. You didn't raise the chicken, you didn't play with it, you didn't cut off its head, pluck it, and then cook it. You just got a Happy Meal. Or I don't really know because I've never really ordered meat. But like you get a product. And so for the Enclavers, it's the same system of privilege where they don't really have to deal with the externalities of their actions, and they're easy to just kind of abstract off away. And so, again, that's very much a thing Naomi Novik is interested in talking about. And in terms of like, how is Elle going to reform this system when it's so ingrained deep in there?
They basically have the conversation, and Ophelia is like, look, I want what you want. Go, I will give you a power share. Go to the school, get my son out. That's what I want. Because Elle's like, I'm not helping you put the school back. Like, I don't know what your plan is. I'm not doing. And she also was like, I don't know if I take this woman's deal. Like, do I want to take power from this maleficer? But she kind of doesn't really have a choice. And Liesel's like, no, of course you're fucking gonna do it. Like, we're absolutely doing it. Oh, I forgot to mention on their flight over here, Liesel and Elle begged.
So here's the thing, guys.
It was for comfort. It was her comfort.
My proclivities on this channel by now are well known in terms of the topic of sapphic love. I didn't like that scene. And it made me realize, kind of like how much I disliked Kaveh in Axiom's End, that I really shipped Elle and Orion a lot, and I didn't like it at all. I was like, no, your boyfriend, you're still grieving your boyfriend. That's what's happening right now. No sapphic fun between hot girls.
And meanwhile, I was like, I get it. The comfort.
No.
Because what it is Elle is having a really hard time relaxing and falling asleep, and Liesel's like, don't worry, I got you. Like, and it's funny because their scene is described so functionally where Liesel's like, does this feel good? Does this feel good? Does this feel good?
Like,
and
it's
then
a checklist.
Yeah, and then when it's Elle, she's like, no, this way. Do it this way. And it's just it's great. I thought it was like cute, sweet. But my shipper heart also completely ships Elle and Orion. So I was like, this is not Endgame. Have fun on your stop on the tour that ends in Orion.
Okay, so they get on a plane. The entrance to the school is in a big tourist attraction because it's hard for mouths to get through a tourist attraction because there's so many normies there. And so they get back into the school and they can't find any of the mouths. There's Patience isn't there. There's some like blood on the walls, but there's nothing in the school, in the entrance to the school. So they're like, okay, we got to search. And they go searching and they can't find anything and they can't find anything.
And they're trying to be really thorough about it. And eventually they're like, let's go back to the graduation hall. And they end up going through the gymnasium, which is where they did their like runs. And they like go in. And Adia and Liesel are both with her. And they're like, what the fuck is up? This is really weird. And they go into the gymnasium, and sitting on like the equivalent of a bench, it's not actually a bench, it's just Orion. It's been 2 weeks, by the way, since graduation by this point. And she's like, oh shit. It's Orion. And she looks at him and she calls out to him, and he looks at her, and his face is just blank. Like, and yet there's this look in his eye, like, and he doesn't recognize her, but he starts walking towards her. And there's something so off-putting, like immediately off-putting, that she throws up his shield. Because he's not speaking, there's nothing. He just starts speed walking his way towards them. And they're like, oh fuck, something is up. And this is, getting up to the scene, there was a pit in my stomach because I knew it wasn't going to be straightforward. This is Novik. She's going to, like, the dread was building.
We're halfway through the book. They can't just save Orion at this point.
She throws up a shield and he touches it. And when he touches it, she feels the same feeling that she felt when she was in a Maw-mouth. That devouring, unending hunger. And she's like, why the fuck does Orion feel like a fucking goddamn Maw-mouth? And he's like pushing his way into this thing, like literally fighting against her shield, like one finger at a time, cramming his way in. And she's like, what the fuck is happening? And she ends up yelling at him. She like grabs a chair and is like, oh, Lake, you dumb ass, what are you doing? He stops and he looks at her, and he says Galadriel, because he calls her, even though she doesn't let anyone call her Galadriel, he calls her Galadriel, which is just, I love it. But he says it, and he says it weirdly, like not a human speaking, and he has to say it a couple more times before it is said in a voice that vaguely resembles his. And he stops, like acting as if he's gonna kill them. And it feels like in that moment, like he was in hunting mode, because she had seen him when he was killing Mals. He was so single-mindedly focused, and that was the look he had when he turned towards them and started walking towards them. And why she threw up the shield, because she was like, oh yeah, that's his hunty face. He's out for blood. And they're like, oh my god, what do we do with him? And they were like, we can't take him out of here. She's like, I'm absolutely taking him out of here. And she was like, we're gonna get on a plane? How are we gonna get him on a plane? Like, how are we gonna convince that guy? But then Elle starts walking away, and he starts following, like just a couple paces behind, but he starts following. And there's just this unease in all of them. Being around him just feels real fucking weird. And they're like, okay, we're gonna get to Wales. And I'm gonna speed past the travel experience. It's not great.
Because she basically goes like, if there's only one person who can heal him, it's my mom.
And we're taking him, even though my mom is not going to be happy about it. So they get to Wales, and there's this, I'm going to mention this one little detail because it was great. They get out of the car, and she's like, Mom, I'm so sorry. Because her mom's waiting for her, and like literally falls to her knees and like, oh my god, my darling girl, what the fuck? And then Orion, who, because again, Elle got out of the car, he's following her at this point. He just rips the van that they were in, just like rips out of it. Her mom's like, oh fuck, this is bad. And she's like, Mom, you have to help him. You have to help him. He didn't choose this. Something has happened to him. And her mom goes, who did this to him? And Elle knows that he didn't choose this. And she gives an answer that she didn't realize was the answer until she says it. And she goes, Ophelia Lake, his mother. And she realizes as she says it, it's true. Whatever is happening to him right now, whatever has happened to him, is his mother's fault. The Maleficer's fingerprints are all over it. That's all her mom needed to hear, was this was not his choice. He didn't do this. And the bleeding heart is in. It's a sucker on her mom's forehead. They're going. And her mom takes them. Normally, if she's doing like a big working and someone's really sick, there's like a particular like grove. Because her mom, like, it's all under moonlight. They're in nature. Like, it's a bit kumbaya. Like, her mom, if Yancey is like a hobo wizard, her mom is like a hippie wizard. Grounded earth magic kind of vibes. And her mom takes her to a place she's never been before. And it is far past everything else. They all walk there. And it is to a old rundown house with this big yew tree in the front. And Elle can feel that this was the home hundreds of years ago of another witch, just like her mother, who it's imbued with that healing energy. And her mom says, I need your help. I need you to help me. I'm not powerful to do this enough on my own. And like the tree pulls back and the leaves are like, no, all right, it's scary. And her mom's like, he didn't choose this. He didn't choose this. And the magic presence that is still imbued in this space is like, God damn it, okay. And like the door opens. Her mom is like, he's gonna have to walk through himself. He's gonna have to choose to walk through himself. Elle is like, Orion, you need to walk. Like, I can't force you. And she like looks at him and is like, you're gonna have to. And for a moment, she sees him, like she sees Orion, and but he looks anguished. Like there's just this thing, and he ends up walking in.
Well, first she starts yelling at him.
Yeah.
She's like, Orion, get your shit together. I loved how like they still have that relationship.
It's the same.
It's what were you saying? It's like a live action
Tsundere,
right? Where she just is like hyper mad at him all the time, and it's really
like
funny.
she shows love by being mean. And that's what he responds to. To her credit, that is what he responds to. Her mom goes in with Orion and stays there for a while. And then at the end, like the tree's like shorn in half, like some stuff falls, and she goes in, and her mom's like literally passed out. Like, and her mom was like, I did the best I could. And Orion is like in the back in shadow, and she's like, Orion, and he's like, you should have left me. And she's like, you ungrateful fucking bastard. What do you mean? And but she's like, I gotta take care of my mom. So she starts taking care of her mom, and like he's himself. He's just incredibly quiet and sad and like withdrawn and depressed. And at one point, like she's trying to lift her mom, and she was like, you carry her. Like, you did this, you do it. Her mom's healing. Orion is literally not talking to them. He's not engaging. Adia and Liesel are like, is he okay? What's up? And eventually she talks to her mom, and she's like, thank you for fixing him. And her mom's like, I didn't fix him at all. I couldn't do it. All I did was give him hope, and I don't know if that was the best thing. And what you realize is whatever thing has happened to him, it's still there. Like, it's still there. And he's really upset. And there's literally a point where she sees her mom and Orion went into the woods together, and she kind of sneaks in after them. And he's literally on his knees before her begging. And she's like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't do it. And in like with her hands on his like on each side of his face, like, I can't help you. While this is happening, Ophelia Lake sends her a letter that's like, please give this to my son when you think he's ready, which she hates because it feels manipulative.
And then the letter itself is so wonderfully passive aggressive. We didn't mention this at the time, but it's so great how like she's a very affable evil wizard. She has what was that Elle described it as like kind of like a tired middle school teacher kind of persona.
Yeah,
about her,
she's like beleaguered. They get the letter. Eventually she gives it to him to try get a reaction out of him. And the letter is basically like, my darling boy, I'm so glad you're alive. We met Elle. She's amazing. Wish we would have met her earlier. Please come home. We love you. And Elle's like, fuck everyone. He's saying like, nah, I'm not good, blah, blah, blah. And then like him and Elle have a moment, and they do the sextants. It's very sweet. Very quick. It wasn't a whole scene. But anyway. And after this, they end up, Adia gets a call from Lou, and it was literally just Lou sobbing, crying, and her mouse was the one who called.
They have like little familiars.
Lou's not the one who called, but it was her mouse. And it's Adia just looking at Lou, sobbing. And she's like, yo, something the fuck is up. Elle, something weird is happening. Lou is like uncontrollably sobbing, and she won't speak. And they were like, okay, she must be under a compulsion. But if she was under a compulsion, how could she manage to, like, there's this whole reason, like, why would she be sad if she was under a compulsion? And basically what they figure out is that she agreed to whatever the compulsion was. Whatever knowledge she now has, she agreed to it, but now that she knows it, it's really fucking shitty. What they'd been told was that her family was going to get to help, like, learn the Enclave spells to help shore up Beijing Enclave, then they'd be able to use it for their own. And Adia's like, I think something has happened. Lou's kind of missing, and they hear from her cousins or something about this, and they were like, we have to go. We have to go to Beijing Enclave, and we have to help them. Orion's like, okay, I'll come too. And they were like, awesome, we're gonna go on a trip. They end up going to Beijing. They have some of the Beijing and they basically tell Beijing Enclave and her cousins, like, hey, we're coming. We're either going to help or something's going to, like, happen. Like, figure it out. They get there. They're attacked by Beijing Enclave, by a group of people, and Elle realizes that she very easily can deflect their magic. But not only can she very easily deflect magic, but, like, Orion does this thing where, like, a spell, like a net spell comes at them, and he just grabs it, and it's gone. Like, the spell's just gone. Like, he's just sucked it right into him. And they're like, oh, wow. Because he's always been able to, one of the things he could do was when he killed Maleficaria, he was able to take the Malia from them and convert it into mana, that he never needed power. He was just able to get it from killing Mals. And now he does that with the spells that other people threw at him, which they've never seen him do before, but it happens kind of casually. Lou's cousin comes to get them and brings them to the Beijing Enclave. They have to get in. It's not a physical entrance, it's a spiritual entrance, so they have to get in through meditation.
Which is hilarious.
And there's this point,
Elle is so not a meditating person.
Yeah, there's also this great part where they're just walking and walking, trying to find the entrance to the Beijing Enclave, and, like, Orion's not paying attention to anything, and all of a sudden they were like, Orion, do you think you could help? And he was like, help with what? And they were like, get us, we need to find the entrance to this enclave. And he's like, the one right over there. And, like, he just, he knew it, which in retrospect makes so much sense.
Yeah, there's all these breadcrumbs being laid.
It's so good. So she ends up going to this place where she can hear, like, chanting and shit. And it is kind of like this room inside the enclave. And there's this disc, this giant disc sitting on top of, like, a tube in the ground. And they're laying these bricks on it that slowly squish the disc down. And then there's a wall, and more bricks are coming through the wall. And all the council members for Beijing are there doing this thing, chanting, doing this working. And Lou's family is tied up from the ceiling. Like, or not from the ceiling, but they're tied up near this. And Elle is immediately like, the fuck, what? So she turns everybody, like, they try to attack her, and she's like, flick, flick. And she turns the council members into stone.
What she realizes is that Lou isn't there, but Lou is inside of the circular stone thing that they're building around.
There's little gaps for stuff to come out.
And this is where she realizes that this is the Mao that enclaves are built on. They have to have somebody sacrificed to go in, and that forms the foundation. And I can't remember if she realizes it now or in a little bit.
No, it's in a little bit. In the middle of a speech, she's yelling at everyone because she's like, okay, they're about to squish. She realizes Lou is in this thing, and they're going to squish Lou before she realizes what's actually happening. Because on the disc, it says it has things for longevity, eternal life, never dying, all these spells written on it. They just keep putting bricks on, and she needs to get the bricks off. And she starts, like, she turns them all to stone. She frees her Lou's family, and she starts trying to lift the bricks, but the bricks are heavy as fuck. They're so heavy. And what she realizes is these bricks are manifestations of will and mana. It is the will of all the people making mana to build this enclave. She realizes all the people on the other side of this door don't realize that somebody is literally being squished to death to do this. So she gets rid of the entire wall, and she has them all look. And she's like, you guys, this is what you're doing. You are making bricks to squish a person. And she starts yelling at them, and she's like, you're condoning sacrifice, and da-da-da. And she's going to say murder. And then she realizes, no, not murder. Everything on that said eternal life, undying. And she realizes why there's vents and why there's a family tied up. And what she realizes is they're making a mom out. They're going to squish her until she's goo.
And that's how mom mouths are birthed.
Yeah, she's gonna leak out. It's hunger. It is the hunger and the will of the people placing these bricks. It is the wish, this unending appetite, and it squishes them into the goo. The goo comes out. It will then immediately eat the family, which is her family, and then they'll send it out somewhere else into the world,
so they don't have to deal with it.
And you're like, holy shit. This is how enclaves are built. All of the mom mouths are the results of the foundations of enclaves. And she says to everyone, we are literally making a mom mouth. And she's like, you have to help undo this. Like, you have a choice to be implicit in this or not. And so they start like helping her get rid of all of this stuff.
Because she's basically like, look, if you guys help me, I can make a foundation based off of not a Mouth, off of the Golden Sutras that she had found. Because basically what they're doing is that they are, with their will, the foundation of an enclave is literally like a brick on nothingness, on the void, and then everything else is built off of that. And I don't quite remember how metaphysically Mouths are connected to that, but there's something about how Mouths connect the void to a reality, and that's why it's set up that way. And that's why you have to create one, essentially. She can just do it based off of like if everyone works together to, and she can be the focal point to create the foundation, a new foundation, so that the enclave won't collapse.
So they get Lou out, and she's just, her one hand is mangled and crushed because it was beginning to press down on her hip, and her one shoulder is, it's just so fucking insane. And her little Shaoxing is, I think, his name, her little familiar was hiding in the hollow under her neck, like the hollow of her throat. And Al's like, she wouldn't have wanted you there, my boy. Like, she didn't. And he's just like, no, this is my mom. And it's just so fucking sad. And like, Lou's dad gets her out, and Elle's like, carry her away. We're gonna shore up this thing. And she starts the Golden Stone Sutras, and she's saying it, and she's like, okay, I have to build the foundation. So she's just taking bricks and she's throwing them onto the thing, but they're like heavy, and she's having a hard like time. So eventually other people, Lou's mom being the first, start coming and helping her move the bricks, and they start being able to lay them correctly, because at first she was just throwing them on top of the old foundation, like any which way. And then everyone is helping, and like all at once, like, and tons of people are coming and helping, and suddenly she's not even like carrying them, it's just being put in her hands and like placed down, and they're doing this thing. The book starts floating before her, she's able to say this thing, and she gets to the last page of the sutras, which literally just says, please protect us, please just stay and protect us, and be the force around us. And then everybody starts saying it, because she translates it into Chinese, or no, she says it in Sanskrit, and then English, and then somebody else translate, and then suddenly everyone in the room, all of those people, are asking the void, asking the universe to build this safe space. And it's beautiful. They all lay down the last bricks at kind of at the same time, and it does it. The thing is done. It solidifies the enclave. It's an amazing scene. Absolutely fantastic. Immediately afterwards, they try kill her.
The old council wizards.
The old council members like are like, okay, and they go, and all of a sudden they're gone. Like, they go to cast their spells. Elle is drained at this point. She ain't got nothing. She can't. She was just gonna take it, and then they're just gone. And Orion's there, and he looks at her, and then he walks away, and you're like, Orion, where did those people go? What the fuck just happened, my guy?
Elle goes after Orion.
Oh yeah, Orion is like at the airport. He didn't just walk away. He was like, I'm going.
I gotta go home. I gotta go to New York and figure out what's happening. And she's like, this is a terrible idea. Your mom's an evil wizard. And he's like, I gotta do this. And so then the next big thing that happens is that, so when she was really young, Elle had at one point tried to live with her father's parents.
Just meet them. Just meet them.
Who live in India. And her grandmother is like one of the greatest seers of all time or whatever. And when she got there, her grandmother took a look at her and spat out a fortune telling type thing, or a prophecy of like, she will bring death and destruction to all the enclaves of the world. And nobody liked that, so they then kicked her out. And so that, has always stuck with Elle, and she's always been really pissed that this prophecy has hung over her head of that she's going to be an evil wizard. That becomes important in a minute. But before that, there's an enclave in Dubai who she had like a friend who calls her from there and goes, hey, your great grandmother seer, whoever, said that we're going to be the next enclave that's going to get hit. You got to come and save us. And she, again, is grumpy about it, because she's just grumpy about having to help everyone, even though she won't not do it.
And she's also grumpy because she made the decision. That's why these two things are connected so much. She made the decision, I'm going to go yell at my grandma, my great-grandma. I'm going to tell her, look what I did. I saved an enclave. You said I was going to destroy it. Fuck you. And she's like, I'm going to go do it. And then Dubai's like, we need help. And she's like, I don't want to go to you. I want to go yell at my grandma. And Lisa's like, my girl, you need to go help. Because, like, Ibrahim, he's not actually part of the Dubai Enclave. This guy, Jamal, is. But Jamal asked him, and now Ibrahim's going to get into the Enclave if he can get Elle to show. And eventually Elle's like, okay, that's fine, I'll go. And so she goes to Dubai. They haven't been hit yet, but she knows that it's whatever's going to attack the Enclave is going to attack the Foundation, just like it did in Beijing and London. So she's like, okay, let's just fix the Foundation beforehand. So they do the working.
Basically the same thing.
It's more coordinated. Liesel is like, I love Liesel. She just like order.
She's hilarious.
They do it. It goes really well. Everybody celebrates hard afterwards. Everybody's like, woo, we did it. And they want Elle to come and celebrate and everything, but she can't. She feels the Malia. She feels that presence, that icky, sick feeling. And she's like, I can't do this. I'm leaving. So she just leaves and she decides, I'm going to Mumbai and I'm going to my father's family's compound and I'm doing this.
So she's able to hop on a flight essentially and get to India, and she goes to see her grandmother's compound. What does she find there? She finds that there is a mawmouth going at the walls of it. It's trying to get through their shielding. And at this point she makes a connection.
There was a point where she was like, see, nobody attacked Dubai. My grandmother was wrong. My grandmother was wrong about two things. She was wrong about the attack on Dubai, and she was wrong about me. I am saving enclaves. I'm not destroying them. And in that moment, she calls Ibrahim and she goes, the attack's going to happen in 30 minutes. You're not out of the clear yet. You have 30 minutes to get everybody out. And then she sits there and she waits for 30 minutes. And you're like, oh my god, she's the one. There's no rogue Maleficer just attacking the enclaves of the world. When you kill the Mawmouth that was part of the building of the Foundation, you separate the Foundation from the Void, and it will send part of the... So some enclaves have multiple Foundation points, in which case you're only sending part of it careening, but if it has just one, you're fucking up that enclave. And that's why the smaller, newer enclaves just totally got demolished. And you realize... when she killed the Mawmouth in the library in her first year,
so good.
That's what destroyed that first enclave. That she'd made friends with a young freshman girl whose entire enclave just disappeared. And then when she killed that other enclave, that's what hit another one. And then when she killed the one in London, that's the one that hit Beijing. Oh, it's so good. When she killed that Mawmouth on graduation day during their plan, that's what hit London. That one of London's things. Then when she killed the Mawmouth in London, that's what fucked up Beijing. And so she's standing there she realizes, I have to kill this Mawmouth because it's attacking my family's compound. That's going to be the one that fucks up Dubai. It's her. Her grandmother was right. There was an attack coming to Dubai, and she has been killing all the enclaves. And she realizes in that moment that the one enclave, everyone died in it. Everyone who was still in that enclave died. And she's like, oh my god, fucking revelation. So she kills the Mawmouth, and she goes, you don't even get to see that scene. She just kills the Mawmouth.
At this point, she doesn't even actually have to fight them. She just tells them that they're dead. And they, through her power of belief, they are dead.
So she goes in, and her great-grandmother is there. She realizes her grandmother said the prophecy that way for a specific reason, because technically what she's doing isn't actually bad. She's not an evil, terrible, Malefice or wizard, which is what her grandmother painted it as. And she said, why did you say it that way? And her grandmother breaks down crying and is like, that was the only thing I could say for the best outcome. I played through all the options, all the ways this could go, and I needed to protect you from her. And what you learn is, the thing that Ophelia did to Orion, whatever it is, we're not sure yet what the fuck it is, but whatever she did, Ophelia was looking for the counterbalance, and Elle is that counterbalance. And so if she had let Elle be loved and taken care of and brought into the family, Elle would have flourished and would have become noticeable, and Ophelia would have found her quicker. So she purposefully isolated Elle with her mother in Wales so she'd never be found. And she had to say it the way she did because, if she would have let Elle stay, Elle's grandfather, Arjun's father, which is her great grandmother's son, would have taken Elle and jumped off a fucking cliff with her, because the only way he could stand killing his only daughter would be for him to go as well. And it's just this tragic fucking tale of this great grandmother making a terrible decision that would make for the best outcome. And you realize she loved her. Her great grandmother has loved her this entire time, didn't think she was a monster, knew she wasn't a monster, but let everyone believe it for her safety, to the point where she talks about how she could have saved her son. Great grandmother could have saved Arjun. She could have given him a warning, but Arjun would never have forgiven her and would have ended up giving himself to Patience anyway, because he would have known that Diti made the decision to choose him.
The price had to be paid, essentially. And so if he didn't pay it, somebody else would.
And it would have been Elle's mom and Elle. And Arjun would never have forgiven her for making the decision to choose his life over theirs. And so she just didn't tell him, because like Elle asks her at one point, why didn't you warn him? And she says that she has had to make there have been times where she tried to warn people, but telling someone they have a choice is kind of no choice, and that she's had to make decisions about what she can and can't say. And she, Elle doesn't fully forgive her. But in that moment, when they walk in together to the rest of the family, everybody realizes. Everybody understands, because they realize Elle just saved them from the smallmouth. And Arjun's father is so mad. He says, I'm not living in your house anymore, because he realizes you isolated me from my grandchild by spinning this profit. And it's just, gotcha in the fucking
It's a really good scene, because this has been such a thing for Elle all of her life, that her family kind of tried to kill her, or at least threw her out. It's a really cathartic moment for Elle. And it's full of emotion.
She has another conversation with her grandmother, and her grandmother said whatever Ophelia did, whatever happened with Orion, the year before that,
they had a Scholomance that basically all of the students died.
A graduation year, all the seniors died. Nobody made it out through graduation, and everybody was like, oh, this is why you have to be extra careful. Like, nobody questioned why every single graduate that year died. And her grandmother's basically like, whatever she did, the power from that she used for whatever evil thing, you were the counterbalance. You are whatever evil is in Orion. You are the balance to that. It's amazing.
It's good stuff. I think what happens next is that Liesel calls and is like, what the hell are you doing? There's a war on.
That's exactly what happens.
The Shanghai Enclave and the London and New York Enclave are going to war. And so this is the part where basically a bunch of wizards have to fly to a battleground. But again, they can't fly magically, because that would use up all their power. So they're just all on the same flights, like side-eyeing each other. And she eventually gets there, and there's a bunch of fighting going on. And so what happens is it happens at the gateway to the Scholomance.
All the Enclaves had to put in mana to run the Scholomance. And a bunch of the lesser ones want to get out of, now that it's halfway in the void, want to stop doing it. So they went to blow up the gate to fully punt it into the void, so then they wouldn't have to give any more of their mana. And New York's like, no, we're not doing that. And New York is using this as a power play. They are here to make a move with this. And Will's right. They come into battle. So there's people from different enclaves all going at it. And Elle's just like, I have a plan. I need to deal with Ophelia and get her to undo whatever she did. I'm here for that. And she's just walking around. People are throwing things at her, and she's like, no, I don't want it.
She keeps turning them into stone so that they'll stop doing it. But the thing is, and this is Elle's key problem throughout the books, is she can't figure out where she's going, because she's in a maze that's specifically designed so that people can't find. So she's a super powerful sorceress, but she keeps walking in circles, and she's getting so mad about it as people keep trying to kill her.
It's great, because there's this point where she was like, all the people, because she ends up finding people who were in her graduation year, and they end up kind of banding together and being like, well, if you're here, Elle, we know whatever you're doing is the right move, so we're going to work with you. And because her plan at that point had basically been, I need to get down into this well to walk down to where the gate is, so I'm just going to rip the garden up. If I just rip the garden up by brute force, and then she gets all these people, and they're all enchanters, they're all combat made wizards. And so they're like, yeah, brute force. So they literally start making a giant shovel. And Adia and Lou show up. And Adia's like, oh my god, you fucking buffoons. You can't just rip your way through it. It wouldn't have worked. And because Adia's an artificer. So she's like, you're all too impatient. And she's able to figure out what it is. they're able to get down, and it's just this whole like group of them that are like, we're just gonna follow Ellen, and they go down into like this underground portion, and there's like the Shanghai Enclave has a side going. New York and London are over here, and they're doing stuff, and Ophelia isn't there, and she's like, God damn it, that's who I'm here for. What am I gonna do if she's not there? And then she's caught in compulsion, but it's a friendly compulsion. And what you realize is she can just wave off things and attacks that have bad intent. But it's just an invitation compulsion, just like, hey, come over here. What you doing? Come over here. And she goes over, and she ends up on the Shanghai side, and she sits down, and she meets someone who Will briefly mentioned earlier. He mentioned a wizard who was with like 30 other wizards, was able to get in and kill a Maulmouth. And this guy is the domina of the Shanghai Enclave. When he was 6 years old, the Shanghai Enclave was closed down because a Maulmouth got in. His mother and sister were taking him, and his father barely got out. He grew up, and he decided, no, I'm getting my Enclave back. So he collected a group of wizards. They collected tons of mana, and they sent him in. And he was able to destroy the Maulmouth. They did the Shanghai Enclave, and now the Enclave's up, and they have built hundreds of other enclaves. They have shared their wealth with other people, and so he's considered very generous. But Elle's looking at him and like, you made like 40 other enclaves. You have literally made like 40 Mals, like 40 Maulmouths you have just created. So she's immediately like, fuck you. You used to be a guy I looked up to, but now I'm not. And he's like, listen, I'm not here to defend myself, but I need to give you some information. And basically what he says is, I never killed that Maulmouth. I got in there. I was in the Maulmouth for 6 days. My circle of friends and loved ones were waning magic. And in that moment, I realized what the basis of enclaves were. And what he did is, instead of killing the Maulmouth, he just resealed it and redid the foundation spell for the Shanghai Enclave. So he just reattached the Maulmouth, who eventually fucked off again. But that's what happened. He then just transported it somewhere else. And what he realized is that Maulmouths, when they were created other places, they would just get thrown halfway across the world. So suddenly there was tons of Maulmouths being thrown into China, because China had like one enclave. But a ton of other people were getting attacked by the Maulmouths of Europe and the US, because during World War II,
London kept opening gates, which each caused a Maulmouth.
5 gates! In America, every 5 years, a new enclave was popping up, and they were all getting thrown toward Asia, because they were throwing them places with not a lot of... Because the more rural an area is, the less successful Mals are, except for Maulmouths, because they can eat anyone. And he didn't think that was fair, so then he started building tons of enclaves to throw back there. When you talk about mutually assured destruction...
Yeah, it was like nuclear proliferation almost.
Yeah, and so they just kept making more enclaves and more Maulmouths, and he was like, it started getting too much. We're going down a path. And he's like, and Ophelia tried to stop it. And she tried to stop it in a really fucked up way. And you're like, oh god. Oh god. And what Ophelia Lake did is she literally used the longing, because again, to make the Maulmouth, you have to have a lot of longing, and normally that longing is for the creation of an enclave. But what she did is she wanted to make a powerful weapon, and the way she did that was, instead of getting longing for an enclave, she took the longing of all those seniors who were supposed to be graduating, who were so close to graduating, including New York Enclave kids, London Enclave kids, independent kids, all their longing to get out of the school, something that Elle just experienced in the last book. And she took all of that. She took a untainted embryo. She killed the embryo. She used that to make the little squitch embryo, to make a tiny little embryo-sized Maulmouth, and she put it back in the embryo. And that's Orion Lake. He is a Maulmouth in an actual body, but he is a Maulmouth. In that moment, Elle realizes that when he shoved her through the portal, because Patience was there, it wasn't because he was trying to save her or he thought Patience was going to get out. It's because he realized in that moment what he was. He had never faced one before. It was the one Maleficaria he'd never fucking touched. And he saw it, and he recognized the hunger that was in himself. Oh, also earlier, there's a part where he tells her, before he leaves to go back to New York, that he ate all the Maleficaria.
Yeah, that's why they couldn't find them in the schools. He just ate through them. He's like unkillable.
He literally just ate them, including Patience. He ate another Mawmouth, which is what Patience did to Fortitude. It ate Fortitude, which meant they were
he's
both
like
still
3
alive.
Mawmouths deep at this point.
He's 3 Mawmouths deep, motherfucker. And she's like, oh my god, he is a Mawmouth. He's literally a Mawmouth in a body. And the reason he doesn't have like the eyes and mouths of the other people is because he doesn't need it. He just takes their energy and their mana, and that's how he produces the mana out of him. And like Ophelia made the ultimate nuke. Like, she made a terrible thing, and it is literally her fucking son.
And more than that, she made a nuclear reactor, essentially, because what he can do is he can eat things and then transform that Malia and recycle it and cleanse it into mana to go into the power share of New York. So he can essentially convert that Malia into mana.
And she also made sure that that whatever she made was able to think and rationalize, so it wasn't just an unstoppable killing machine. It could learn, you don't kill these people, you kill these things, and you can like rationalize, and we love mommy and daddy. And you're just like, holy shit. And she realizes this guy's building up, telling her, you have to kill him. The universe made you. He's like, we were looking for you for years. I knew when she made Orion that the universe was going to have to create its counterweight. And that's you. You are the counterweight to Orion Lake. And she's like the spiral of her life just leading to this fucking moment. And she's like, no, I cannot do this. As they're ending this conversation, because he basically is like, this is a trap. She's going to spring it once she knows I'm here. And a portal opens up. Ophelia comes through with Orion. Orion looks fucking tense as fuck.
He's dressed up like a normal person instead of just like shorts and a t-shirt like he normally is.
She can tell he's super uncomfortable, but he's looking through the crowd. He's looking for something, because she imagines the conversation they had where she's like, listen, you're gonna come and you're gonna help me win this war, blah blah blah. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna do it. But he comes anyway, and she realizes Orion comes here anyway, and he's looking for someone, and he's looking for her. And when he finally sees her, there's relief, just utter relief. And he lets his guard down, and he lets himself be the Mawmouth. He takes away the conscious part of him, and he just lets that hunger come forward. Just like when they found him in the Scholomance and there was nothing else to eat, and that hunger had come out of him. And his mom is like next to him, like, oh fuck. Everybody notices, because again, that terrible feeling, like, what? And mom's like, oh no. And then she's like, point that way, buddy. Like, if you're gonna do it, that direction. But at the same time, she made this spell to make all of the things. And what you realize is her plan was to get because like 40 different enclaves representatives are in this underground area. And she just was shrinking it so they would get real close. And she was just going to unleash Orion on them and threaten them. This was a power move. So anyone who survived would know she had the ultimate weapon and would have to do what she said. But Orion wasn't going to help her. He was never going to do that. He came here to die. And he knew Elle was going to be here, and he was looking for her. And when he sees her, that relief, because the hope her mom had given him about being able to change, he knows it's not a thing. He knows what he is now, and he's just like, nah, I just gotta die. I need the thing. And she's like, oh fuck. The guy from the Shanghai Enclave gives her like a power share and is like, listen, yeah, you gotta do the thing. You're just blown away. Like, holy shit, what the fuck? He starts going to eat people, and they're throwing up shields, and he's breaking into them.
It's like a gravity well that he's just pulling them all towards him. Like, he's power on a level they don't. He's like a walking nuke.
She describes that he doesn't have like the tentacly, like slimy bits, but you can feel it. It's in the air, this reaching hunger, his arms going, and he starts getting people, and they're screaming and crying, and everybody's like, Elle, what are you doing? And she ends up throwing up a shield, a giant shield around everyone. It pushes him back. And she walks up to the front of that shield, and she's looking at him. Adia and Lou and Liesel come up, and they stand next to her, and they were like, Elle, like, we're here. We're going to stand with you. And, like, everybody is kind of like, yeah. And then this Jamal guy comes up and is like, not Jamal, there was this other dude. This other dude comes up and is like, kill him. You gotta end it. You can't let him live like this. And she's like, no, I'm not going to let him live like this. And he is reaching, like, this whole time, he's like, trying to get through. And his head comes through. And as his head comes through, like, Orion pops back up, and he's like, Elle, please. Please. And she puts her hands on him. And Adia and Lou are touching her. And the other dude puts a hand on her. And she says, you're already dead. And at this point, I'm sitting. I'm gonna paint you a picture. I've gone on a walk. I'm sitting on a park bench, like on a bench in front of a lake with a fountain going. The sun is kind of going down, and I'm just crying on this park bench with my sunglasses. Like, I hope nobody notices. Because you're like, oh God, what is she gonna do? Like, what is she fucking like? And you know what she has to do. There's only one thing. But at the same time, earlier in my walk, I went, the sutras. The sutras. Can she give Orion a new foundation? Please, please. And so she decides she's gonna, like, she's like, you're already dead. And everything, like the school. Because, the other thing you realize, patience was the foundation, was the maw mouth of the school. And he ate patience. So the school starts going down. Everything is crashing, and she realizes she needs to build a new foundation. So she grabs onto him and she starts reading from the sutras, and she says, stay. Please stay. And she starts saying the incantation in Sanskrit that they used at the end of the sutras. And Lou suddenly starts chanting it as well in Chinese. And then Adia is saying it in English. And then suddenly more and more people, all of the, like, first it's just the kids from the graduating class coming up and being like, stay, protect us, please stay. And then everyone, all the other wizards come, they start putting their hands on her and connecting on each other. And then eventually Ophelia and Balthazar Lake come, and they put their hands on Orion, and they're like, stay, please stay. And it's just this incredible scene. And more people, like eventually Adia, who's a fucking boss, puts her hand on Orion as well. And more people are and Lou comes, and she's like, not in straight lines, make a circle, multiple things.
No, Liesel.
Liesel, you're right, Liesel. And she puts her hands down, and they start making all these paths, and it's this whole room of people saying, stay, please stay, and this golden light is filling everything, and it creates a sense of stability. And Orion reaches out and grabs her face and says, I'll stay, Elle, I'll stay. And you're just like...
all the feels.
Because you realize he's now the new foundation, like the good part of Orion.
He somehow is now that point in the void.
He's now the new foundation for the Scholomance. They didn't need to lay, like, they just used his corporeal body, and he stays. And then it like jumps to her and her mom, like, meeting her family in the compound again, and she helps them with stuff. And basically what you learn is that everyone kind of went back and was like, yeah, we'll keep making enclaves, because the problem is people want to make enclaves, and because of the compulsions around the enclave spells, nobody knows that to create an enclave, you need to create a maw mouth until you are under the compulsion. And once you're under the compulsion, you've already given half of your mana away, so you're gonna do the thing. Her and her friends are trying to, like, underground tell people that, like...
apparently there's a Facebook group that all of the elder wizards of the world are in, which I just thought was the funniest thing in the entire world.
And she can't, like, because if she posts, they, like, lock down her phone. Because the other thing, not only does the compulsion mean they can't talk about it, but it means they actively have to convince people that that's not what's happening. This is, like, a foundational thing. Because she's been teaching other people, like, her and Liesel made a, like, how-to for how to put up the Golden Stone Sutras. And what they realized is that Elle can do it by herself, but that you can adjust it so it can be done by a chorus of people, so that you don't need, because the problem with the Golden Stone Sutras before is you needed one incredibly powerful wizard to be able to put them up. And now they've changed it so you don't. You can just have a group of people and, like, make sure everybody knows how to do this. But a lot of people, because she's offering to everyone, I will fix your, like, I will give you a new foundation.
But the thing is, the Golden Enclaves are not as, like, good as the modern ones. Yeah, they're, like, much smaller. They're basically good for, like, sleeping in and stuff. So she's got, like, a plan with her friends on a Facebook group to go around the world, and she's gonna kill the Mawmouths while also, you know, rebuilding the foundations of the other enclaves.
Because they're using that idea that there's Maleficer going around attacking the enclaves, because nobody's really connected that it's her killing the Mawmouths yet, to convince people, because, like, what happened with Dubai was like, oh, we're gonna get hit, we need to, like, protect ourselves. And then Elle's friends will be like, we'll fix it for you, don't you worry, Pikachu. When she did kill the Mawmouth who is the core of Dubai, she'd already laid the new foundation. So while there was some people who died and, like, some shaking, the enclave itself made it through just fine. And so she's just going to go find all the Mawmouths, kill them. And right before she kills them, like a couple days beforehand, she'll have her family in India be like, yes, The San Francisco Enclave is next, and then they'll go in, they'll fix it, evacuate everyone, and will kill the mom mouse, and they're just going to use this. And she's like, eventually somebody will figure it out. Eventually someone's going to figure out that when you kill a mom mouse, that's what's fucking up the foundations. But in the meantime, they're going to use that to convince as many of them as possible to change. So Alfie has already convinced his father to change all of the foundation stones, because there's like 8 others in London that need to be fixed. And it's just like, holy shit, like this is a big job. Like, and there's like, she has to go to South Africa and start killing them there. But before she does, she goes back to the Scholomance, which is now being worked on a lot. All the kids, not just people who can get a Scholomance position, but everyone is going to be able to go. They have redone all of the equipment. They have people in there, because now you can get people in there, because Orion is there to kill all the mouths. Because before, like, people wouldn't come in and out, because the more in and out you had, the more likely mouths could get in. And now it's like, nah, if there's mouths, Orion's got them. Don't you worry. And he'll just take care of them. So there's a lot of adult wizards in there working on the mechanics of the school that had been broken down for years. And she's able to go in and visit. And he, for some reason, can still just eat the power from, like, when he kills mouths, he can just still eat them. And they're all like, you shouldn't be able to do that. And he's like, but I've always been able to do that. And it's that kind of simplistic, like, belief, like, yeah, no, that's just something I can do, that enables him to continue doing it. Because he's so, like, he just has that simple, yeah. He's like, yeah, when term's over and it's like summer break, I'll come and visit you and we'll go hunt mouths together. And she's like, that doesn't sound great. And he's like, that sounds like the best time. And she's like, what, like visiting Paris, vacation on the beach, hunting mouths, that sounds about the same. And he's like, yeah. And he's just so happy. He's so happy. And she's almost mad, because she wants him to have trauma from his childhood that isn't actually there.
Or be mad at his mom.
And he's not. Like, he's forgiven her for what happened, and Elle has not. Like, and she, like, she made him go spend, like, a couple weeks with her mom to be like, deal with your trauma. And his mom was like, honey, he had one thing that was really upsetting him, and now you fixed that, so he's not upset anymore. Stop making it. He doesn't have it. But
maybe
I think
you need some more therapy.
Yeah. He's so happy, and she's happy. And it ends with them kissing and being happy. And that's the fucking book.
Oh, man. All of the feels. This book was such a ride. It was such a ride from beginning to end. Novik just knows what she's doing. Again, there's such a difference in quality. I always think between, like, this and, like, For the Wolf, which is, like, not a terrible book, but it's so amazingly mediocre when you compare it to, like, this or any of the Locked Tomb books. There's just such a difference. Okay, now we have to talk about the things that bother me.
Okay, let's go.
My biggest problem is the Novikism of, like, the message being that we all need to just get along. Like, I talked about this in Uprooted, and, like, again, this is not like a grimdark series. This is pretty much how it's been since the first book. But, like, nobody is really bad, and everybody just kind of needs to get along. So the thing is, in a lot of this happened in Uprooted, and there was a little bit of this in Spinning Silver as well. I don't really remember that much of this in Tamar, but there's the kind of, like, faith in humanity, and if we could all just communicate and deal and, like, believe in each other kind of feeling that I just instinctually cringe away from.
That is not what I got from this. Yeah, I got that, like, humanity is failing. Like, because the idea was that, like, they will always go back to enclaves. They will always continue to cheat and use Malia all the time. Like, it's always going to happen. And so she has to create a system that accounts for that and minimizes it, but in a healthy way versus what Ophelia was doing. Because everything Ophelia had been doing was to minimize the amount of cheating people would do outside. Like, if she had Orion, who would just
vacuum up their mistakes,
but also produce all the mana they needed, then they wouldn't need to cheat. Like, you don't need to cheat if you have a nuclear power plant. You don't have to kill something else to get mana.
That's fair, but I think part of it is that, because I've been thinking about it since I finished yesterday, part of it is that the book is very specifically not trying to be wish fulfillment. And that's one of my other sort of issues with it is that like I wanted to see Elle fight the mom mouse and it be a cool fight each time. I wanted her to like fuck shit up and she didn't really. That's not really what she has to do. And so
Hmm.
like she never even gets a final conversation or argument with Orion's mom. Like
Ophelia, yeah.
that's it. They have that one conversation. She sees Ophelia and then that's it. She doesn't like get to yell at her, which Elle talks about. And like it is a realistic thing that in real life you don't always get to have a final resolution confrontation with somebody who has mistreated you. Like that is a thing that I've just learned in life happens. But it's not narratively, it's not great, and it feels like his mom, just gets off the hook without any actual final confrontation about it.
I would have liked seeing some guilt out of her. Like, I wanted her to eat shit. Like, I didn't necessarily need a final
Yes,
confrontation, but I needed to know, like, I needed to hear that Ophelia was changing things and trying to do things, like, actively, like, something. I needed to see regret. Like, I wanted Ophelia to look at her son, see what he had become, and just regret everything she'd done. And you're right, we didn't get that moment. I at no point was like, I want to see it. It would have been fun and I would have enjoyed it, but at no point I was like, I want to see Elle fuck shit up and be like a super. Like, I'm like, I know she can do it. I'm more impressed with her for not doing it, but also because that's me.
that is the difference between you and me. That's true.
I don't want to say like I'm a Liesel, but I'm somewhere between Liesel and Elle in the sense of like the kinds of decisions I try to make. And so like I'm not a like no, you can't the burning brimstone like that's not going to work. Like that's not how you actually make change. Debatable.
I think part of it is just like, so I was thinking about like that final moment where they're all touching hands to bring Orion from like to keep him there. And like I think like for example, I would have just not felt it was quite as kumbaya-ish if it had been like just him and Elle in the void and like they had been like betrayed by the other wizards or something like that. Okay, so the thing is in the real world, conflicts often are caused by people just not communicating or normal people making decisions that conflict with each other, much in the same way that they do in these books. But the problem is that those initial misunderstandings and miscommunications and conflicts lead to like very real consequences and deaths and like battles and stuff. And so it feels a little disingenuous that the book ends so bloodlessly and so with so much of an ethos of like everyone's okay if they could just get on the same side. And I understand that like that may just kind of be a personal thing for me and that like I just kind of cringe away from that kind of
But I
a
still never felt that. Like she literally said,
really.
people that were literally in that room who helped put their hands. They did it out of a sense of self-preservation. They didn't do it because they actually cared about Orion or any of it. But the place that they were in was coming down around them, and they needed to get out. So a lot of those wizards, because she talks about it afterwards, how like a lot of the people who were in the room saw Orion, saw her save Orion, and rebuild the foundation for the Scholomance continue to support and are trying to sell the Enclave building spells to other people. They saw the worst that could happen and they went, we want mana. Our stores are depleted. So at no point did I think it was kumbaya. I literally just see the continued cycle and the fact that all these Mawmouths are still around and they're willing to make more.
No, I get that. I think that doesn't quite fit tonally with the epilogue. The epilogue tonally is very happy and like, okay, this is going to keep happening, but we have a way of fixing it. And I think it's also just there's so many scenes in the book of like, well, not so many scenes, but there are several like really wrenching, powerful scenes of everyone working together, like in the Shanghai enclave, not the Shanghai, the Beijing enclave, and then in Dubai. And there's a couple of other, or like even when she's going through the battle and all of her friends are coming back to her, it just felt a little. Again, I don't know how much of it is a problem with the book and how much of it is I just cringe at that kind of like
Neatness.
yeah, neatness. Like in Uprooted, that was one of the things I didn't like about the ending was that, it kind of was like if everybody had just talked, we could have fixed this problem. But like one time I did like that in Uprooted was that, the conflicts with the prince ended in a battle that killed like thousands of men and that was like a real like you understood why everybody went into that but it had a real cost and this book didn't and there's an extent to which I'm being unfair because the book never really set out that tone. Like from day one, it's been much more of a, oh, okay, everything's pretty good, ultimately speaking, for being in a murder college where everybody should have massive amounts of trauma. So like I get that, but that personally bothered me a little bit.
For me, it was a book about intentions and making like when you're at a fork in the road between like how to compromise, because she doesn't condemn compromise. For Elle herself, she has a slippery slope of going from like good intentions to not good intentions, and like Ophelia is a great foil for that, where like Ophelia has all the best intentions, but she makes shitty, the means are really shit. And so that for me felt like the heart of the book, which is why I think I was okay with the ending. And that was never something I wanted. Like at no point was I like, you know what, I want a huge battle sequence, but in Uprooted, oh, hella satisfying.
You know what it is that at my soul, I'm a Song of Ice and Fire fan, where it's like I have that like one beaming hope at the end of an incredibly dark, grim like tunnel sort of thing. Like that's how those books are going to end, is with like this single moment of hope in an incredibly dark moment of otherwise just like terrible things. And so like I think maybe that was just thematically not for me.
And see, that for me is exhausting. I don't know if I could actually read. I'm being honest, I don't know if I could actually read all of A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, just watching the TV show sometimes, like, I don't know if I could ever rewatch it because so little good ever happens. And that's exhausting.
Well, I mean, that's a fundamental difference between the books and the TV show, is that the books do, at the core of them, have an idea of doing the right thing because it is the right thing despite everything else. And the movies are just like, hey, isn't it cool that we're grim dark guys? I hate it, though, everything about the TV show.
Yes, I know. But for me, it's just that, like, even if that's the case, bad things are still happening to characters that I like all the time with not a lot of good happening.
It's funny because while I was reading this, I was like, I desperately did not want her to have to kill Orion. Like, just desperately. And now afterwards, I'm like, that might have been a better story. You know what I mean? Like, not that it would have been, but it's kind of that thing where, like, what I want desperately is not exactly what...
Listen, there's the fangirl Will, who does not want her to kill Orion.
Right,
and then
yes.
there's,
desperately, like, I was like, don't kill her. And then I was like, oh, maybe that would have been pretty tragic and kind of interesting.
No. It's like, I can't watch what's that show everybody loves? Breaking Bad. I cannot watch Breaking Bad because nothing good or happy ever happens. I've watched a handful of episodes and it's always bad shit happening. People dealing with bad shit, bad things might happen. We're doing illegal things and we might get caught, and then bad shit happens. Like, that is it. And it's so stressful, and I'm just like, no, like, I can't.
There is a scale between Sesame Street and Breaking Bad, and everyone falls somewhere on that spectrum in terms of stories, like between those two poles. And like, yeah, for me, this was just a little. It sounds funny, but a little too a little too optimistic in the human spirit. Like, that's almost like. But again, I think that's almost a bit of a tone thing that just bothers me with all of Novik's work. But an even bigger problem is that her characters spend too long sitting and thinking about themselves and things and motivations and meanings. And I noticed this in Spinning Silver, and it's a little bit in Uprooted as well, where like Elle will just talk to herself constantly of like, and because this happened, then that happened. And because we're together, we're not far apart. And because we're not far apart, we're all putting our hands together. And I'm like, would you shut up and get on with the action? And like, don't get me wrong, the book is very well paced. I gobbled this thing up. But Elle has a massive amount of just talking to herselfness. It's one of the things I talked about in the Locked Tomb trilogy, and that I don't think, or series, and that I don't think those books have enough of that. I think they have too little of the characters sitting and thinking about their motivation.
I was gonna say, this is the opposite problem you have with the Locked Tomb.
By the way, guys, Maria is on her phone, not because she doesn't care about this podcast, but because the audio isn't working on our normal app, so we're having to do it through a Facebook call. She is still talking to me, even if it doesn't look like it.
My AirPods died, and I can't plug my headphones in.
But what were you saying? It is the exact problem I had with the Locked Tomb trilogy or series, where again, they don't talk to themselves they don't think about themselves enough in terms of having that interior dialogue. Whereas in this one, she just won't shut up.
See, I don't know why, but I really liked it. Having those moments where Ella is processing the information. Because the thing is, sometimes in the action points, stuff happens there's a lot of plot, like, very good. And if you read the book, you'll notice we normally skip like a lot of stuff. There wasn't a lot of unnecessary scenes. This book, despite being longer, everything that happened led to something else. But I liked those quieter moments of reflection to be able to process. And it's part of what now here's the thing. I can understand why it might be too much, and by dialing it back maybe like 30% would work for you. But for me, in the same way that Spinning Silver at its pace, at its contemplative slowness worked for me, this worked for me. So I acknowledge that that's something that could be better for other people, but for me, I loved it. Om nom nom, bitches. Call me a mom now. I will gobble it up. And it will live in me, in my memories forever.
That's interesting, but yeah, no, you're totally right. Again, that's probably a thing where there's a certain amount of tolerance versus non-tolerance people have for it. Because again, it's very well written. I've read cases of that where it is not well written. In this case, it is well written. I would have also liked it if a few of those internal conversations had been externalized. Because by this point, Elle really should be talking with her friends a little bit more. Like, it makes sense that she'd be a little bit more out of her head. And there's such a great supporting cast of characters that when she does have conversations with them, it's so much fun. But yeah, I could see actually how maybe that's just because for me, cut it down 30% and you're golden. Like, that would have been a golden enclave.
And for me, like, I understand why 30% down could have been a benefit. And I think if it had been 30% less, I wouldn't have noticed and I would have also really enjoyed it. But as it is, I really loved it. I think it's kind of similar to with Katie and Nona, where for her, Nona was exactly, and like subjectively, I really liked Nona as it was. But from an objective standpoint, you could have cut some of that. I think similarly here where you could without losing too much, but for me the emotional beats, like those contemplative moments is what helped really sell the like emotional bits for me. But I think you also could have gotten there without it. I liked it and I completely understand why it would be an issue. Any other complaints to lob at this book?
I would have liked to see more interaction between Elle and Orion at the end, just because I really missed them. But like, I get it. It's the falling action.
It makes me want to reread the two books where they
Yeah,
do
it really
interact a
does.
lot and appreciate those moments where Orion, where like the crumbs are there that Orion is like a mom mouth. Like,
Fucking mom mouth. Yeah.
Holy shit, what a fucking insane ride. I mean, the idea, like all the twists, just so well laid out leading up to that final thing was just fantastic.
Masterful.
Masterful.
This is what we said about Uprooted. Masterful. Novik is a master of her craft.
Which would you put above? I mean, it's hard to compare because Uprooted was a one volume. Here's the story, go, and then this is like volume 3, like of the trilogy. But which one would you say is objectively the stronger?
Oh, that's tough. I think objectively speaking. Okay, so here's the thing. Because it's one book, Uprooted feels tidier and in kind of, it feels more high class because it's one. It feels like, oh, it was just a story the artist wanted to tell versus a pleb series that they wrote for profit. Like, there's, when you have a one and done story, it always feels like that a little bit more than a series for whatever reason. And it is more self-contained. At the same time, this is such a hard thing for her to nail, and she nails it. It's kind of like we talked about with Harrow the Ninth, where like this is like ending a trilogy this well with all of these beats hitting one after another. I think is very difficult.
And it was completely different than the other two books. The other two books had the conceit of the Scholomance. You were in school. The setting was the same. And going into this, she could have fumbled it so bad, walking away from what worked, which was the confines of the school. Like, I had no idea how this book was going to play out. I mean, I knew they were going to go rescue, like, Orion, like that, obviously. But, like, I had no idea how the interaction would work. And that could have been a huge fumble. So I completely agree. I think objectively, this is the harder one to pull off well.
No, I agree with that. And I think I enjoyed Last Graduate and this one more than Uprooted. But, like, I really liked Uprooted. Like, let's not get it wrong. Like, I still think Uprooted is a really good book. And, like, I'm immensely fond of it. Again, I'm even fond of Spinning Silver, which was not a book that I super enjoyed reading.
He said he wouldn't finish it, guys. I remember that.
That's got to be it, because we were trying to do shorter episodes, and this is not one of them.
It is not.
So we will talk to you all later. Let us know in the comments what you thought. Did you read this book? Have you been following along? Did you watch our previous videos? We love you, our parasocial darlings.
Bye.